So these layouts are defining how controls or components are going to be put into the frame. Actually, we have seen so far that you can choose one layout, right, for the whole frame. But actually, there's a way how you can have different type of layouts within the same frame. And this this involves using some type of components that can accept different type of components inside of it. It's some kind of a container component that is called a panel, and we're going to see that also today, inshallah. But the main thing is that let's just first of all have more control over the flow layout. That this is the default one that we've been using. There are others, we're going to see them, some of them, but actually there are many, but we're not going to be able to see them all. And these are basically coming since the AWT. So this is not something kind of new, this is something kind of old, but Swing also incorporates AWT plus adds some more things, and we're going to see some of those other things. Also, at the end of today's class, I'm going to show you, inshallah, how you can just use the NetBeans designer. Now, because we're doing things manually, we're creating buttons manually. Actually, there's a way to not do that and just graphically create the buttons, the layout, the labels, etc. And this is something we're going to be doing later. But for now, I just would like you to be able to know how manually do things, and then we'll let the tool generate some of these codes for us. Now, let's just start with this flow layout. So I just created this small app project. Let's have a class, and let's call it flow frame. I'm just going to create a very simple frame that is just going to be able to insert. Let's have the constructor, and let's initialize this with just test our flow layout. You remember this constructor, the super? So this one does, it's called the superclass plus the title. And now I need to have the set size 400 by 400. Let's just keep it like this. And then this, just to put it in the middle, set location. And since set location, actually I can use two things, the X and Y, and there's a point. Well, basically the same thing. A point is, I'm guessing, is some kind of a class that has X and Y. So if I just go to the point and see, a point is something that has an X and Y. So if I'd like to use this one, I just need to create a new point, but then the new point I need to just import it and etc. But I don't want to do that, just keep things simple. Let's just use this 800 by 400, which is, you remember, this 800 means like something like here, and 400 something like here, so it should be in the middle. And then what's important is this now, this set layout, where I'm going to have new flow layout. And in the flow layout, you see I have three types of constructors. Usually this is the one that we've been using. We did not bother much because we wanted just to have something to work with. Now what I'd like to show you is I'm going to add new buttons, and this is another way to add a button, because now I'm creating a button. Let's call it button 1, and I don't give it a name because I'm not doing anything. I'm not adding any listeners action performed on these buttons, just to have something to show on this frame. So I don't care about giving them a name so I can use them later on to have more properties, to attach more things to them. I don't care about that. I just would like to have 3 buttons, so I'm just creating 3 buttons, and then I'm adding them into this frame. Now running this thing, of course, is not going to show me anything because I did not call it. You remember with some of you that had some kind of weird experience with this set visible inside the constructor, but this was also only a problem with the Windows. So for those of you who had that problem, basically it was that if you put set visible inside the constructor here, you're not able to see all the controls, or some of you were not able to see all the controls until they resize the window, the frame itself. Once they resize it, then they magically appear. Now that was a problem just in Windows, because I did not have that problem on Linux here. And as you can see, if I use the set visible inside the constructor, I had no problem with it. But some of you had a problem with it. So the thing is, just you can put it here, it's okay, it's the same thing. Now if I run this thing, now these are the 3 buttons. And you can see this is the 400 by 400. But notice now, these 3 buttons are centered in the center, because by default, you know, the constructor, if I use the default constructor, it's going to put this flow layout to be centered. This is the by default, and which means also they're put centered. Also notice the space here between the buttons. By default they put like 5, which you guessed it, probably it's 5 pixels. So it just puts as a space between the different components 5 pixels. You want to add more? Fine, you can use this kind of constructor that you can have more control. You can specify more things. So let's just do that. So instead of having just the default constructor that takes no arguments, I can use, for example, at first the one that takes an argument, and to do that I need to have this flow layout dot, and I can specify, okay, left, right, or leading, trailing. Some of these are actually the same, because this I don't recall exactly, but this left and leading are the same, and the right and trailing are the same. So you choose left or leading, that's going to be left, or trailing is going to be right. So let's just take them right. So now what it means now, I would like this frame to align them to the right. So if I add them, they're going to be aligned to the right. If I want to have them to the left, well then to the left, etc. Let me just stop this. I forgot to set the default close operation. That's why I'm having a problem here. And let's do that before this default close operation to be exit or close. So now they're going to be to the left. If I want them to be spaced more, I need to use the other constructor, the one that is taking the alignment plus the horizontal gap and vertical gap, which basically the horizontal gap is if I have more than one line, there's a space between these lines. I can control the space that is between these lines. Let me just put something like this, and this is 10 and 10. Now let's run this thing. Now you can see now the buttons are more spaced, have more space between them, and if I just go back and shrink the size, the space here is different. If I want it to be like having the horizontal, that's the space from between the controls on the same line. The vertical is on 2 lines, and let me do something like this, for example, put 20 at the vertical. Let me run it again, and if I go back, so you see now it has more spaces. If I'd like to make it more obvious, let's put 50. That's going to be obviously taken some space, and you can notice that also the space also started in the first row. The first row has had some space now. So this is basically what it's all about. So you can customize this flow layout, right, left, center. By default, if you just select the default one, it's going to be the centered and just 5 pixels horizontally and vertically. So that's the first one. There's another one where there's some examples. You can just use those examples to see. You can have a look at this code if you want. The other one is the grid layout. Well, the grid layout will allow you to have some kind of rows and columns, which basically you can say, well, instead of this flow layout, I would like to have a grid layout. And with the grid layout, you can specify how many rows and how many columns, and also what's the space between these rows and columns. Same idea that with the flow layout. So now let's just this put like, I'd like to have like 3 by 2, which means now 3 rows and 2 columns. Now if I have 3 rows and 2 columns, even using the same, I'm not going to change this code over here. What is going to happen is that my frame is going to be, what happened? Well, I said 3 by 2. But because I have 3 by 2 and then not more controls, which means I have 3 rows, 2 columns. By doing so, it just keeps filling ones at a time, and then when it's done, well, there's no more space for the rest. Now if I'd like to see them in more, maybe let me put, for example, 1 row and 2 columns. Well, let's put 2 and 2 because I have 3 controls, so let's put 2 and 2. Now by putting 2 and 2, this is going to become different. Now notice what happens because I have 2 and 2, just put the first one, the second one, and then there's no more space because I have only 2 columns, so it goes back to the line and then puts the third one. And the space here, you see the space is the default one by default. I don't recall exactly. The default space, this is by default is 0. The vertical gap and horizontal gap. So if I want to put more, I can just put some commas and let's say 10, 10. Now doing so is going to give me some space between these buttons. So this is another way how to put your controls, your components in a frame. And this is kind of convenient if you have, for example, something like a calculator, where you have a lot of buttons there. This can be an interesting way how to use these layouts. There's another one that's called border layout, which works this way. Actually, you can specify where you put things, and of course you have also you can specify the gap. That's the only thing. So now if I say the border layout, so the border layout, it works a little bit differently. Now you can specify the gap. Let's put 10 and 10, so I can have a little space between them. But when you add something, you can specify where you want to add it. Border layout dot, and then there's this center, east, north, south, west. These are the ones that basically you can find them here. North, south, east, west, and then center. So for example, the first one I'm going to put it north, and then the other one south, and then the other one is going to be, let's say, west. So now I can specify this one is going to be north, and then let's copy and paste. Now this one south, and this one east.
You have the same location.
Same.
But these have the same location. Like
You want to put them all in the same place? Well, no, this is not going to work. Because this, I mean, if you put them all north, actually, I don't know what is going to be the result. But probably they're going to be all Control C, Control V. Probably the last one. Because you just put one on top of the other, so the last one is going to be showed. That's, yeah. Same thing that happened in the beginning where we did not choose any layout. You just put one on top of the other and fill the whole thing. Yes. Okay. If you put them all of them in the north. If you put them all in the north. Yes. No, actually, when you have these 3 buttons, all you put them in the north. What happens is actually you don't see all these 3. You see only the last one, which means if you click on that one, you're not clicking on 3 of them. You're clicking only on the one that you're seeing. So if there's an action in this button 3, this is the only action that you're going to see. Even if there's some action in button 1 and button 2 programmed, but it's not going to be fired, not going to be executed, because it's not available. You're not seeing it. Yes. Yes, we can have 2 layouts, but you have to use some different panels, and that's what we're going to be seeing. Yes, inshallah. So now I'm just introducing that there are more than just the flow layout, and these are the ones. I mean, but you can use something like a combination of having many different kind of components and different layouts within the same frame, but you have to use panels. So these panels means these are some kind of containers. You can just specify, okay, this place is having a panel, and that panel is going to be using this border layout. There's another panel in that same frame, and this is going to be a flow layout, and the third one is going to be a grid, etc. So you can specify how these things are going to be organized.
Now the layout methods, just to organize the buttons or even the text field?
The text fields, buttons, the controls in general. Any component is going to be respecting this layout. Yeah.
Why there is a difference in size about the flow layout and
The border layout and the... Well,
the size of the button?
yes, because actually that's a good point that you have noticed, that if I use the flow layout, actually it just takes just the default size based on the text that I typed. But if you chose like the border layout, or it will take the whole space of that border. So that's how it is programmed to behave. Like for example, now this thing is going to take the whole north and the whole east, but what if now I just change it to flow layout? The size of those buttons is going to change. Of course, this is not. Of course, there's no north and south. No, these values are discarded. This is going to be just the size of the actual text that was in the button. So this is how these flow layouts work. They define how the controls are going to be appearing, so they have some effects on the size. Now let's do something, and let's rename this to be more something inclusive to others. Let's call it layouts frame, and by doing so it just renamed a lot of things. Now I'd like to have like 2 different kind of layouts, let's say, within the same frame. So in order for me to do that, well, I need to define to divide my frame. Let me just go back to this my small board. Yes. So let's say that this is my frame. If I want something to happen and to have different kind of layouts, I will have to imagine I'm going to draw some parts and say, for example, this part is going to be flow layout, and this part is going to be border layout, for example. But these are 2 parts, so they have to be ordered and sorted in a way. For example, these can be panels, but these panels, how can they be organized? So I'm going to have a flow layout, or maybe some kind of a layout. Probably the grid will be more interesting. I'm going to, let's say, have, for example, this is my frame. In this frame, I'm going to have a grid layout of 1 column and 2 rows. And in each one of these, I'm going to insert a panel. The advantage of a panel is that a panel is a component that is a container. I can put some more things inside of a panel, and I can specify the layout of a panel. So that's what I'm going to do. So inside here, I will, for example, put a button as a flow layout, and the others, let's put them like some north and south, or maybe another grid layout or something like that. So let's do something about it. So first of all, I'm just going to get rid of those buttons for now, and let's just get rid of them. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is that this is going to be a grid layout, and this grid layout is going to be from just I said like how many rows? 2 rows and 1 column. And I can put also some space between them, like put 10, 10, just to have some kind of space. Now, just to show you what I'm going to do, I'm going to create this new panel. So this J panels, this is a new component that's going to be visible. Actually not. These components are not visible. They're not meant to be visible unless I change their color, then they will become visible. So let me just call it, this is the panel 1 equal new J panel, and you see I give them some names because I would like to use them, and you see you can specify to this panel what kind of layout I would like to use in it. But let's for now just use the default one because I would like to show you that I can also use this panel. Yes.
You said that it will not be visible unless you give them a color.
Yes.
How?
I'm going to show it. I'm going to show the color. But first of all, I'm just going to like to create this panel, and then this panel 1 dot. If I'd like to see it, I can set background color, and that's okay. Let's make it red. Now this one is going to be red, so I can be able to see it. Yes, you have the question. Panel is a type of component that can be a container. I can put something inside of it, some buttons, some text fields, some labels. So it's some kind of a container that can have other type of components.
The default layout for panel without
I think it's the flow layout is the default one. Yes, the default layout is a flow layout. But let me just do something now. I'm not going to change the color. I'll just would like to have this panel 1 and panel 2, and let me just add these into the frame. So I'll now add them, and then but I did mention that they are going to be added into this grid layout, so I'm going to see them somewhere. But if I run, actually I'm not going to see anything for now because, well, they're not meant to have some kind of shape or anything. They're just places where I can put things in them. Now I would like to see them, so I will just give them some colors. So this is how you put some colors, and let's say this one is red, and the other one is not changed its color, so you can see it. Now you can see now this is the one that is in red. This was the first one, which was put into the first place. Now just to go into the other one, let's say panel 2. Let's give this panel 2 another color. And now let's run this. What is happening? Yeah, because either it's capital or lowercase, and I just mix them. So color dot, actually this is a class that you can use color dot, and you have a lot of different kind of colors. You can choose by name, or you can use by code if you want to. And let's say that I'm using this green now. Now if I'm running this thing, because I just did not do a good pasting, now let's just have another paste, and if I run, I'm sorry? I cannot hear you. Why what? No, I just did this. So I put it red, and then I changed its color to green, so the red was gone. It's the same panel that I changed the color. Now each panel is going to be having a different color. Let me do something now. These are two panels, as you can see them. The space here is the size of the vertical and horizontal gap. Yes. Exactly. I can put things in them. Now let me put something inside this panel. Something. Let's create some buttons. This panel 1, I'm going to create a new button and put it inside of it. So I can create it the same way that I created before, but let me just do something in this panel 1. You see, it has first of all set layout. I can specify the layout of the panel, and the layout I'm going to make it new flow layout. So let's say this one is going to be having a flow layout. Is going to be centered. Well, let's keep it centered. I don't care. And this panel 1, I'm going to add to it just panel 1 dot add, and I can add another component, which is, let's say, another button. The things that I did before with button 1. Now I'm adding a new button, and this button is going to be added to the panel that was added to the frame. So now in my new things, I have a new button inside this one here. I would like to have another button here. Well, fine. I'm going to do the same. Let me do this time this panel 2, and let me add button 2. So I'm creating another button, call it button 2, and I'm adding it. Notice that I did not change, specify the layout, just to see that by default is the flow layout. Yes?
What would happen if I declare the button as the previous way that we used?
It's the same thing. I just need to have a button here, J button, and that's it. I just need to initialize it. There's nothing. It's just.
I need a place.
These are just variables, right? Now, what I need to do is that instead of doing this like that, I'm going to use button 1 and button 2 until, but not completely, because I did not initialize them yet. Now I need to initialize them by saying this button 1 is equal new, and I just this thing, this object that I just created, I just save it somewhere, and then I can use it here. The same thing, I can create the second button that I saved somewhere and then give it a name. Yes? Which square? This one? Well, notice that this is depending on the frame. So based on the size of the frame, the panel is going to take because I said that this is a grid layout. The grid layout has I divided my frame into 2 parts, 2 rows, 1 column, which means that the panel now is taking the first, the half, and the other one the other half. Now, if I change, for example, the grid size and say I would like it to be 3 by 3. Now, because I added only some of them, but it's a 3 by 3, but actually I added only 1, not enough. I'm not going to be seeing this. Let me just make it. What do you mean the lower one? The lower one is bigger. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. It was like this. Okay, so now you want to have more this one. You want to have this one bigger than the other one? Well, that's another issue. You can specify, for example, that this, instead of dividing only by 2, let's make it like 3 rows, and this second one, this panel, is going to take 2 rows. This is something you can do by this call span, but I don't want to get into too much details for now, because it's possible. That's the answer to the question. Is it possible? Yes, it is. But I don't want to get into a lot of specifications, specific situations here. Yes?
Can we have a panel inside?
Yes, you can have a panel instead of a panel instead of a panel instead of a panel.
What will happen to the buttons? Are we going to rearrange it?
Depending on the layout that you're going to specify. It's all based on the layout. Now you can have a panel inside of a panel if you want to, but
That's the location. But we have the flow layout. We can specify the location, either center or left or right. If we have a panel inside of a panel that has a button,
okay.
what will happen to it? It will remain the same location.
Based, if you this button, you're going to add it to a panel.
Yeah, okay.
That panel is going to be having a layout.
I know it's
But I'm just trying to say that layout, because you have many panels. A panel can have a specific layout. You can specify that the first panel has a layout flow to the left, the other one to the right, but the one that you put the button inside of it is the one that's going to be affecting where the button is going to be. Now your question is maybe where these panels are going to be shown, on the same line or different lines. I don't know. I never tried to have like different panels without specific in a flow layout, but we can try and you can see the results. There was a question there. My point is the following. Okay, I don't want to get too technical and specific. The idea is that if you want to have different flow layouts, for example, here I have this is a flow layout inside of a flow layout. This is a flow layout inside of a grid layout. Now, just to do some things clearly showing the layout, I'm going to add this to the panel number 1. So the button 2 now, panel number 1 is going to be having 2 buttons. So this is clearly showing that these are in the flow layout. Now, I just would like to add in this here something in another type of layouts, and just to create button 3 and 4. And what I'm going to do in this panel number 2, I'm going to make the layout to be a border layout. New border layout. You remember the border layout is the one that has north, south, east, west. So I'm going to just add these new buttons. Okay, so this is button 3 and 4. 3 and 4. And let me just add these buttons 3 and 4 to this second panel. So I'm just make them here, and this is 3 and 4. Now this 3, I'm just like to make it north, and the other one south, just to show like. Now if I run this, as you can see now, I'm using 3 different layouts within this frame. The grid layout, where I can put these panels, and then the buttons that are going to be inside of this flow layout, inside this panel here, and these 2 buttons that are inside of a border layout. And that's how you can have a different type of layouts. But actually there's another way, which is actually maybe you're going to like it even more, is using this swing. I mean, there's this kind of different type of layouts, and one of them is that comes by default when you create a J-frame form. Now let me just call this like that. When you use this J-frame form, actually NetBeans is going to open this for you, which is the designer, and that designer is allowing you not to put the code. You can still go for the code and see the code, but actually you can just design by putting panels, right click on things and setting the layouts. And you see this is the free design. That's the one that now we are using. I can specify different kind of layouts, as you can see. And now the one is that I'm going to use, let's say for example, to add some buttons and then some labels, and you can just put them in different places that I want. I can have different kind of, also any of these things I can do this, and I can do them by code, of course, because whatever I do, I drag and drop, something is added here, and there's some generated code for me, which is the button is just a new, it just puts a whole thing, the whole name. This is by default, it gets like the default names, J button 1, J label 1, etc. This is the radio button, this is the combo box, this is the combo box and the radio button. So anything that I do, you see this is it was just prepared by default by NetBeans. And you can see now that these are the buttons. But now check this thing, this is a group layout, and it just prepares something and set the horizontal group, and there's a lot of kind of adding the gap, which is basically some kind of these kind of spaces that you can see here. And so there's a lot of code that is generated for us, and we don't have to care about them. But then all I need to do is just, you see, the code is here, is available. You just make it visible, it just can run on its own, and these are the variables that are declared. So everything is declared for me, and I just need to just design and then put the action, what needs to happen. So that's something we're going to be ending up doing but not for now. I'm not advising you to go for this. I'm just showing you this as some kind of a curiosity, so you can try it at home if you want to. But for now, I'd like you to be able to program everything, so you can be able to understand all this code that are inside. Yes. Yes, you can, but actually you have noticed that this is not like this border layout. It was another type of layout. Yes. Another question? So now, what I would like you to do is something interesting, just to practice this. I've been looking. I closed them, unfortunately. There are some examples from the slides from the book that I found interesting, just to so you can practice actually these things. And I'm trying just to find them. These are the border layout, etc. And yes, this is what I would like you to do. Now check this thing. I would like you to do this kind of frame. Well, of course, this is used in panels, because you see now the panels are these ones. By default, we don't see the colors, but as soon as I click on the button, it's going to set the color. So which means now it starts like this, and then if I click on the button red, then this panel becomes red. Then if I click on the white, this panel becomes white. And then if I click on this, so the blue panel becomes. So that's the something that you need to work with. What you're going to be using is basically the set background color that you can use to set the background color of also the button. You see here, the buttons have some kind of different colors. You can use that one too. So in the color in the button here, you can just, for example, here this button one, you can specify this button one set. Now first of all, just the color, just how it looks, set the background color, and you can specify it to be red, for example. Now if you run this thing, this button is red, but red on red is not a good idea, so let's maybe do this for the other button. This one, let's say button 4, so you can clearly see it. So this button 4 is red, so that's the main thing. It's just the way it looks that was changed. Now in the action performed, you need to change the color of the panel. So that's what I'd like you to do. Of course, you can see that this is kind of different type of layouts. You can see that this is some kind of another layout. So you have to find this thing is something you have to find. So let me free you so you can do that.